The text came at 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday while I was reviewing the final seating chart for the Boston Children's Health Foundation annual gala. 840 guests. 53 corporate sponsors. 2 governors, 4 sitting U.S. senators, the state's lieutenant governor, and the Secretary of Health and Human Services, who had flown in from Washington specifically for the evening. All confirmed. The centerpieces had been ordered. The program had been printed. My remarks were drafted, proofread twice, and sitting in a cream-colored folder on the corner of my desk. My phone buzzed. It was Dad. Skip the fundraiser tonight. Maria's bringing her boyfriend and we want to make a good impression. This is important to us. I read it twice. Then I set the phone face down on the seating chart, directly on top of table 1 which seated 12, and looked at the ceiling for exactly 4 seconds. My executive assistant, Priya Chandrasekaran, appeared in the doorway. She was holding a clipboard and wearing the expression she reserved for scheduling crises. The HHS delegation just confirmed a second SUV in the motorcade. Facilities needs to know if we're adjusting the arrival protocol. Tell them the arrival protocol holds, I said. Route the second vehicle to the east entrance. I'll greet Secretary Mendez personally at the main doors. Priya wrote something down. Also, your father called the main line again. 3rd time this week. I know. She waited. I'll handle it, I said. She nodded and left. Through the glass wall of my office I could see the foundation's open floor. 12 people at desks, 2 more in the small conference room running through the evening's logistics, the program coordinator at the printer pulling name badges. 7 years ago this office had been a sublease on a borrowed floor, and the staff had been Priya, me, and a part-time grants coordinator named Elise who worked Tuesdays and Thursdays. The foundation had grown the way things grow when the work is real. Steadily, without fanfare, driven by evidence and outcomes rather than by attention. We had never done a press release about ourselves. We had never run a social media campaign. We had been written about, cited, referenced, invited. None of that had been self-generated. The work was what drove it. I picked up my phone. There was a second message, sent 4 minutes after the first. His name is Senator James Hargrove. North Carolina. He's important, Renata. We need this dinner to go well. Your non-profit stuff would just complicate things. You understand? I sat with that for a moment. The word, non-profit. 31 years on this earth and my father still introduced me to people as his daughter who does something with charities. He had never once Googled me. Never once asked what I actually did on a Tuesday afternoon. His mental image of me was approximately 8 years out of date and he had worked very hard to keep it that way. The irony of the word, important, sitting in that message applied to a man I had briefed twice this year, was not lost on me. I did not dwell on it. Dwelling was a luxury I had trained myself out of somewhere around year 3 of the foundation, when the work got big enough to require all of me. I typed back, "Hey Dad." Then I went back to the seating chart. Let me tell you what my father thought he knew about me. He knew I had left a perfectly good corporate law career in my late 20s to do nonprofit work. He knew that decision had disappointed him enormously. He had not said it that way. He was not a man who articulated disappointment directly. He expressed it through a particular kind of quiet, through the way a conversation moved on before it finished, through the 3-second pause before, "That's good for you, Renata," that told you everything about what he actually thought. He knew I lived in Boston in an apartment he assumed was modest, and that I drove a car he had never seen because he had not visited in 3 years. He knew that my sister Maria, 4 years younger, was the success story. Maria, who worked in pharmaceutical sales, who wore the right shoes to the right events, who had, apparently, met a senator somewhere between a product launch in Raleigh and a fundraiser in Charlotte, and who had now positioned that relationship as the family's most significant social asset. My father was a man who loved his daughters in the way some fathers do, with enormous warmth toward the version of them he had decided on, and considerable discomfort around any evidence that the version was incomplete. He had decided on my version sometime around my 24th birthday, when I left the corporate law track he had been quietly steering me toward for a decade, and it had not updated since. In his mental accounting, I was a daughter who had made an impractical choice and was managing its consequences with varying degrees of dignity. He was proud of me, I believed, proud in the general baseline way a father is proud of a child who is alive and functioning. But impressed? Well, Maria impressed him. Maria wore the shoes and said the right things, and now she was bringing a senator to dinner, which was, in my father's cosmology, exactly the kind of thing that mattered. I did not resent this. I had stopped resenting it years ago when I had understood that resentment was simply unexpressed hope, and that I had stopped hoping my father would ask about my work. The hope had gone quiet. What remained was a simple and not unhappy fact. We were two people who loved each other across a distance that neither of us had fully measured. What my father did not know, what he had not asked, and what I had not offered, was any of the following. My name was Dr. Renata Osei Mensah. I held a JD from Georgetown Law and a Master of Public Health from Johns Hopkins. I was the founding executive director of the Boston Children's Health Foundation, which I had built over 7 years from a $400,000 seed grant into a $47.3 million operating organization that funded pediatric health initiatives across 14 states. I had testified before the U.S. Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions twice. I had been named to the Forbes Impact 50 list in 2021 and again in 2023. I sat on the board of 2 hospital systems and 1 federal health advisory committee. And tonight I was the host of the single largest pediatric health fundraising event in the northeastern United States. My father had never asked what any of that meant, so I had never told him. This was not a strategy. It was not patience or pride or quiet dignity, though I suppose it had become all three over time. In the beginning it was simply exhaustion. Explaining myself to people who had already decided what I was had always felt like a particular kind of waste, the kind that left you emptier than before you started, because you had spent energy on a door that was not going to open. At some point, the exhaustion had calcified into a policy. When you're ready to ask, I thought, I'll be here. He never asked. My sister Maria and I had not been close in a long time. That was not a dramatic statement. There had been no single rupture, no screaming match, no ultimatum delivered across a holiday table. We had simply grown into people who had very little in common and had stopped pretending otherwise. Maria was charming, socially fluent, and deeply committed to the version of the family narrative in which she was the impressive one. I did not begrudge her that. I had simply stopped auditing for accuracy. The last time I had seen her in person was 14 months ago, at our mother's birthday dinner in Concord. Maria had spent 45 minutes describing her new apartment in Charlotte and the restaurant she had discovered and a weekend trip she had taken with a group of friends whose names I did not know. She had asked me 2 questions, whether I was still doing the foundation stuff, and whether I was seeing anyone. When I said yes to the first and not currently to the second, she nodded and moved on. She did not ask about the foundation. He never did. 3 months after that dinner, I had been sitting in room 430 of the Dirksen Senate Office building in Washington, delivering a 14-minute opening statement on the federal funding gaps in pediatric rural health access. Senator James Hargrove of North Carolina had been seated at the dais. He had asked me 2 follow-up questions, both sharp and well-researched. I had answered them. His legislative director had emailed my office the following week requesting a policy brief. That had been the beginning of an 8-month working relationship. I did not know in that Senate hearing room that James Hargrove was dating my sister. I did not know when his office called mine for a briefing in September. I did not know when we met for coffee at a Georgetown cafe in October to discuss the Children's Health Equity Act he was co-sponsoring. I had known James Hargrove as a colleague, a careful legislator, and a reliable ally on pediatric health policy. I had not known he was my family's dinner table ambition. I found out 3 weeks before the gala, when Maria texted me a photo, her and a man at what appeared to be a charity auction in Charlotte, with the caption, "We're getting serious. He's a Senator BTW." Her emoji selection was celebratory. I had recognized him immediately. I had sat with that information for a long moment. Then I had gone back to my laptop and finished the grant report I'd been working on. I did not call Maria. I did not call my parents. I did not calculate the irony of it because the irony was too clean to be interesting. I simply noted it, filed it, and continued working. His office had emailed mine the following Monday about the gala. He had accepted the invitation 6 weeks earlier, before anyone in my family would have known we were connected. He was attending because our organization was honoring a healthcare initiative he had co-authored, and because 2 of his Senate colleagues were being recognized on stage. The invitation had nothing to do with Maria. It had nothing to do with my family. It had been scheduled, confirmed, and locked in the program for 2 months. The gala was happening. James Hargrove was attending. My family was also attending as guests of my sister, unaware of any of this. I had not engineered it. I had not hinted at it. I had simply continued doing my job. The venue was the Grand Ballroom at the Fairmont Copley Plaza in Boston, which we had booked 18 months in advance. By 5:30 p.m. on the evening of October 14th, the room had been transformed. White linens, deep navy accents, the foundation's logo projected in soft light onto the back wall. 840 place settings. 48 floral centerpieces at $340 each. The live auction items arranged on tables along the east wall. A week in a Tuscany villa, a private medical consultation package, a named endowment at Boston Children's Hospital. $420,000 in table sponsorships alone, not counting the auction, not counting the program ads, not counting the government grants that the evening would formally announce. I stood at the east entrance at 6:02 p.m. in a navy dress and greeted the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Dr. Patricia Mendez, as her motorcade arrived. We shook hands. We had worked together before, sat across conference tables in Washington and in Boston, exchanged drafts of the Pediatric Access Framework that had eventually become language in the Children's Health Equity Act. She squeezed my arm and said, "I read your Q3 impact report on the plane. The rural pediatrics data is extraordinary, Renata." I thanked her. We walked in together. At 6:18 p.m., I was stopped near the bar by the Foundation's board chair, Lawrence Obeng, who wanted to walk through the grant announcement sequence one more time. We walked through it. At 6:26, I approved a last-minute change to the auction MC script. At 6:31, I reviewed the senator recognition order with Priya. 4 senators being acknowledged by name from the podium, including Hargrove, including the senior senator from Massachusetts, including 2 co-sponsors from the Health Committee. At 6:34 p.m., Priya materialized at my elbow. "Your family just arrived at the main entrance," she said quietly. "Should I seat them at table 11, I said. "Make sure they have everything they need." Table 11 was a good table. It had a clear view of the stage. I had placed them there 3 days ago when I had seen my sister's name on the guest list. She was a +4, Maria plus James plus my parents, and had decided quietly that they would be comfortable and visible and have no reason to feel overlooked. I had not told anyone in my family I'd done this. I had not told anyone I'd seen the names. I had simply adjusted the seating chart. "The senators at table 1? Priya asked. "Table 1, I confirmed. He's been there since we finalized the layout 2 weeks ago." Priya gave me a look that was not quite a question. "It's fine," I said. "Let's open the doors." This is the part people sometimes find hard to understand. I did not want the moment that was coming. I had not constructed it. I took no pleasure in advance from imagining it. What I felt mostly was tired. A tiredness that had been accumulating for years. The tiredness of being known incorrectly by people who loved you. The tiredness of explaining yourself to an audience that had already written the review. There is a specific grief in that kind of invisibility. The kind where the people who are supposed to see you most clearly have decided years ago to look slightly to the left of you. I had grieved it. I was done grieving it. What remained was simply the job. I went to the podium at 7:15 p.m. to open the program. I want to describe the room before I describe what happened because the room matters. 840 people in formal dress at round tables of 10. The soft hum of conversation and silverware. The logo on the wall. The program booklets with the Foundation's 7-year timeline printed inside the front cover. 2017 $400,000 seed grant for employees. 2019 First State Partnership $2.1 million. 2021 Forbes Impact 50. 2022 Senate Testimony. 2024 $47.3 million 14 states the gala. A timeline. A record. My parents were at table 11. I could not see their faces from the stage. I did not look for them. Senator James Hargrove was at table 1, directly in front of the podium, 8 feet away from where I was standing. When I walked to the microphone, I saw him register my face. I saw the precise sequence. Recognition, confusion, recalibration. He had known I ran the foundation. He had been corresponding with my office for 8 months. But he had not known, until this moment, that the executive director he had been scheduling around was the same Renata who was apparently not worth impressing at dinner. He had not made the connection because there was no reason he would have. I was Renata Mensa professionally. I was Renata to my family. Two separate worlds that had never touched. Until tonight. He looked at me. I looked at him. I gave him a small nod. Then I addressed the room. Good evening. I'm Dr. Renata Mensa, founding executive director of the Boston Children's Health Foundation. On behalf of our board, our staff, and the 14,000 families we serve across this country, welcome. The room applauded. I continued. I do not remember every word of my remarks. I had written them, I had rehearsed them, and on the night they came out of me the way things do when you have been doing a job long enough. Steadily, without effort, grounded. I talked about a 7-year-old girl named Cassidy from rural Vermont who had received treatment through a foundation-funded clinic and was starting 2nd grade in the fall. I talked about the $12.4 million in pediatric care grants we were announcing that evening, funded through a new federal partnership with the Department of Health and Human Services. I thanked Secretary Mendez, who was seated at table 2. I thanked our senator partners, including, I looked directly at table 1 because protocol required it, Senator James Hargrove of North Carolina, whose co-sponsorship of the Children's Health Equity Act had made the federal partnership possible. Hargrove led the applause at his own table. I returned to my seat. The dinner proceeded. The auction ran. The program moved through its segments. I was at the head table, which placed my back to most of the room, which meant I did not see my family's table. I did not monitor their reactions. I did not check my phone. I had a job to do and I did it. At 8:47 p.m. during the program intermission I felt a hand on my arm. It was James Hargrove. He was not flustered. He was a senator. They are trained against flustering. But there was something in his expression that was not his usual legislative composure. Something careful and slightly odd and, I thought, genuinely contrite. Dr. Mensa, he said. I owe you an apology. You don't, I said. I've been trying to schedule a full policy meeting with your office for 3 months, he said. I didn't realize, I had no idea. James, I said, using his first name the way we had in the Georgetown Cafe in October, the way colleagues do. You didn't know. There's nothing to apologize for. He exhaled. Maria doesn't know what you do. No, I said. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said quietly, she's going to. I nodded. I know. He straightened. Your remarks were extraordinary. The Cassidy story. He shook his head. That's going in the floor speech Monday. I'd be honored, I said. He extended his hand. I shook it. He returned to his table. I picked up my water glass and looked at the room. It was my colleague Dr. Philippa Nwachukwu who made it public. Philippa was the chief medical officer of Boston Children's Hospital and one of our longest board members. She had known me for 6 years. We had met at a health policy conference in 2018, over a shared coffee station and a disagreement about Medicaid reimbursement structures that had somehow turned into a friendship. She had joined the foundation's board in 2019 and had since become what I could only describe as a one-woman institutional champion, the kind of colleague who told everyone she met about your work before she mentioned her own. She was also, I should note, a person of considerable warmth and zero instinct for social discretion, which I say with great affection. At 9:12 p.m. during the dessert course Philippa was circulating. She always circulated at galas, she could not help it, she had the social metabolism of a golden retriever, and she reached table 11. I know what happened next because Priya told me afterward, having witnessed it from the service corridor with the unhurried attention of someone who had worked for me long enough to understand that some evenings were historic. Philippa arrived at table 11 mid-conversation. My parents were there. Maria was there. The seat beside Maria, James Hargrove's seat, was temporarily empty, as he was across the room speaking with Secretary Mendez about the HHS component of the federal grant partnership. Philippa, being Philippa, introduced herself to the table with the easy authority of a woman who had delivered 3 keynotes that year and chaired 2 national committees, and asked how they were enjoying the evening. My mother said it was lovely. My father said it was an impressive event. Very well organized. Philippa said with the warmth of someone stating the obvious, isn't it? Renata has built something extraordinary. 7 years ago this was a 4-person shop operating out of a sublease on Newberry Street. Now we're the second largest pediatric health foundation in the country by operating budget. She said it the way you say something true and proud and completely assume everyone already knows it. I keep telling her she should write the book. The public-private funding model she's architected for pediatric health partnerships. HHS is using it as a template nationally. There's nothing else like it in the sector. There was a silence. My father said, "Renata." "Your daughter," said Philippa. "Yes, you must be so proud. I've been on the board for 5 years and I still feel proud every time I walk into this room." And when she testified before the Senate last year, she shook her head with genuine feeling. I nearly cried. The way she laid out the rural access gap in pediatric care, the committee was silent. That doesn't happen. I've watched a lot of testimony. They were silent. Another silence. A different kind. The Senate, my father said. It was not a question. It was a word being turned over. The Help Committee, Philippa said. Health, Education, Labor and Pensions. Twice, actually, 2022 and 2023. The second time, Senator Hargrove cited her testimony in his committee remarks. I saw the transcript. She paused, apparently registering for the first time the precise quality of the silence around the table. Not polite silence. Not rapt silence. The silence of people who have just discovered they are in the wrong room of a house they thought they knew completely. She looked from face to face. You knew all this?" No one answered. My mother put her hand over her mouth. My father looked at the stage. He looked at the placard on the podium that read Dr. Renata Osamensa, Executive Director, Boston Children's Health Foundation. He had walked past that placard on the way to his seat. He had not read it. "I see," said Philippa. And she was Philippa, so she could not stop herself from adding, gently but with complete accuracy, "She's probably the most important person in this building tonight, aside from Secretary Mendez. And I say that having worked with both of them. It's honestly close." She gave the table a warm smile and moved on to greet the next group. Priya told me my father did not speak for 4 minutes after that. He sat with his hands on the table and looked at the stage and did not touch his dessert. I was back at the podium at 9:30 p.m. to introduce the keynote segment and announce the $12.4 million grant recipients. I spoke for 11 minutes. The room was attentive in the specific way rooms are attentive when the numbers are real and the human detail is precise. I named 4 recipient organizations by their full names, their cities, the number of children each program had served in its first operational year. I named the federal partnership that had made the funding possible. I did not look at Table 11. Senator Hargrove spoke at 9:45. His remarks were scheduled, prepared before this evening, and had nothing to do with what had happened at Table 11. But he began with something that was not in the program. Pause. A hand on the microphone. The posture of someone who has decided in the last hour to say something true. "Before I give my prepared remarks," he said, "I want to say something that is not in my talking points, because it should be said in a room this large." He paused. 840 people went still. I have spent 8 months working with the Boston Children's Health Foundation on the Children's Health Equity Act. I have reviewed the research. I have read the testimony. I have sat in the briefings. What I did not fully understand until I walked into this room tonight was the full scale of what Dr. Osamensa has built. And I should have understood it sooner. He looked at the head table at me. The quiet leaders in our communities, the ones doing the work without the recognition, the ones building the architecture that holds everything else up, they are in rooms like this one. We don't always know their names. We should. The room applauded. Sustained. The kind that builds on itself. At Table 11 my father was not applauding. He was sitting very still with his hands flat on the white linen, staring at the stage. Priya told me this later in her precise way, having watched from the service corridor with the attentiveness she brought to everything. She told me Maria was applauding, quietly, hands close together, but applauding. She told me my mother had taken out a small mirror and was not using it. She told me my father did not move for the full duration of the applause. She told me this not to give me satisfaction because she knew me well enough to know that satisfaction was not the feeling, but because she thought I should know. I did not look at Table 11. I looked at the senator at the podium and I nodded once and then I looked at the room. The event ended at 10:45 p.m. I stood at the exit and thanked guests as they left. 500 handshakes, 100 business cards, 40 conversations I carried in my memory for follow-up. The governor stopped to say the pediatric rural access data had been forwarded to the state health commissioner's office. Secretary Mendez's chief of staff pressed her card into my hand and said Phase 2 funding conversations would begin in January. Lawrence Obeng, our board chair, pulled me into a brief hug and said, "Best gala we've ever run." And I was there for the first one when we had 40 people in a church hall in Cambridge. You do not build a $47.3 million organization without showing up for every handshake. I had understood this early and accepted it completely. My family was among the last to leave. I saw them coming from the edge of my vision. My mother first, small in a blue dress, arms folded across her chest the way she held herself when she was trying not to cry and had not yet decided whether she was going to win that fight. My father behind her, slower, his 61-year-old shoulders carrying something unfamiliar, a weight he had not come in with. Maria beside him, her clutch held in both hands, her eyes at the floor. James Hargrove was not with them. He had said goodnight at 10:15, a firm handshake and a quiet Monday, meaning the floor speech, the policy brief, the work that continued regardless of what happened in families. On his way to the coat check, he had stopped to speak briefly with my father. I had seen it from across the lobby. I had not been close enough to hear it. I did not ask. My mother reached me first. She took my hands and held them. She was a small woman with strong hands, a fact I had forgotten, and the grip of them was immediate and real. She did not speak for a moment. When she did, her voice was the careful, ashamed voice of someone who has been turning a thing over for 3 hours and has still not found the right way to carry it. "Renata," she said. "We didn't know." "I know, Mom," I said. "Why didn't you tell us?" I looked at her. I kept my voice level the way I kept it level in Senate hearing rooms, in board meetings, in the difficult conversations that came with running an organization that touched lives in ways that required precision and care. "You didn't ask," I said. "Not once in 7 years. You knew I was doing something with the foundation. You never asked what that meant. Not what it did, not who it served, not what it had become. The information was never hidden. There was no secret. It was simply never requested." Her hands tightened. My father stepped forward. He was a proud man. I had always known this about him. The pride was structural, load-bearing, not decorative. It was the thing that had made his disappointment in my choices so thorough and so durable. And now that same pride was doing something I had not anticipated. It was turning inward. I saw it in his face. The specific expression of a man who has always held himself to a high standard, discovering that the standard was applied selectively, and that the gap between the standard he claimed and the one he had practiced was larger than he knew. "Renata," he said. "Dad," I said. "The text I sent you this afternoon. I got it." "I didn't." He stopped. Started again. The words were not coming easily and I did not help them along because that was not mine to do. "I didn't know." "No," I said. "You didn't." The silence that followed was not hostile. It was not cold. It was the silence of two people standing on either side of a measurement they have both just agreed to finally take. 840 guests had cleared the room. The ballroom staff were beginning the quiet, efficient work of breakdown, lifting linens, folding chairs, restoring the grand ballroom to its neutrality. In the marble lobby of the Fairmont Copley Plaza, under the soft projection of the foundation's logo on the far wall, it was just us. "Senator Hargrove," my father said slowly. You've been working together." 8 months, I said. "He's a careful legislator and a reliable ally." His co-sponsorship of the Children's Health Equity Act gave the federal partnership the political cover it needed to move through committee. He cited our research 4 times in his markup remarks. The bill, if it passes, changes pediatric rural health funding nationally for the next decade. I paused. "He's a good man, Dad. Maria made a good choice." My father absorbed this. You could see him doing it, the absorption happening visibly like light adjusting after a door opens. Maria was standing slightly apart from the 3 of us, quiet in a way I had not seen from her before. This was not the composed quietness she wore at events, the surface calm of a woman managing a room. This was interior. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost something. "I've been with him for 5 months, she said. "He's never mentioned you." "He didn't know we were connected," I said. "Different last names. Different cities." I didn't know you were together until 3 weeks ago. You sent me the photo, remember? And even then I didn't make the connection to his professional identity until I looked him up. A beat. Neither of us had any reason to link the two worlds. They had never touched before tonight. She nodded slowly. Something worked in her expression. He told Dad. She stopped. When he stopped to talk to Dad just now, he said. What did he say? She looked at me directly. He said that the work your organization does is some of the most important pediatric health work happening in this country, and that anyone who gets to be related to you should understand what that means. I held that for a moment. He's generous, I said. He meant it, said Maria. And then quietly, I should have asked. About what you actually do. I should have asked years ago. That was the part that surprised me. Not my father's accounting, not my mother's hands, but Maria. My sister, who had never seemed curious, suddenly looking like someone who was about to become curious. It was a small shift. It was a real one. My mother wiped her eyes. Come to dinner. Next week. We have a lot to talk about. I looked at her. Mom, I said. I love you. I've always loved you. But I need you to hear this clearly because I mean it. I was careful. I was always careful, and tonight of all nights the carefulness needed to mean something. I've been here. For 7 years I've been doing this work. It was never a secret. I have a website, a press page, a board bio, a Forbes profile twice. My Senate testimony was in the public record. None of it was hidden. It was simply never looked for. I paused. That is not something I can fix over one dinner. I don't want to sit at a table where I feel like an exhibit. Proof that I was right, proof that you were wrong. I want to sit at a table where somebody asks me a question because they actually want to know the answer. My mother nodded. She was crying in earnest now, quietly, fighting it on every breath. When you're ready to know who I actually am now, I said, not who you decided I was 8 years ago, not the story that was easier than the real one. Call me. I'll answer. The door isn't locked. But it has a lock now, and I'm the one who holds the key. I hugged her. I held on. I shook my father's hand and held it a moment longer than necessary. He gripped back. Renata, he said. I should have asked. Yes, I said. You should have. I'm asking now. I know, Dad. Pause. We'll talk. I said good night to Maria. She said good night back, and beneath the quietness of it something had shifted. Nothing resolved, nothing healed, but something cracked open, which is where the light usually starts. They left. I stood in the lobby. The foundation logo on the wall behind me. The room ahead of me going dark and still. Outside, Boston at midnight. Priya appeared with my coat and my cream-colored folder. Cars out front. Final donation tally is $1.24 million from the live auction, pending card processing. Your 8 a.m. is confirmed. And Dr. Nwachukwu sent a text. She says, quote, tell her tonight was everything. Tell Philippa thank you, I said. You okay? Yes, I said. And I was. Not in the simple way, not the way where a wound is closed and the scar is clean. But in the older, quieter way. The way of people who have done real work for a long time and know what it costs and know what it's worth. Solidly. From the inside out. On ground that nobody could shift. I put on my coat. The next morning I was at my desk by 7:45 a.m. The donor thank you emails went out at 8:30. The grant announcement press release went to 14 media outlets at 9 o'clock. Senator Hargrove's office called at 9:17 to confirm the policy brief timeline for the floor speech Monday. I took the call. We talked for 11 minutes about the rural access data and the funding mechanisms and the committee timeline for the Children's Health Equity Act. He said at the end of the call, for what it's worth, she's lucky to have a sister who does what you do. I said, she doesn't know yet that she's lucky. Give her time. He laughed. He hung up. 2 weeks later my father called my direct line. Not the main number. My direct line, which he had to look up, which meant he had gone to the foundation's website and found my bio page and read it. I know because he mentioned the bio page. He mentioned the Johns Hopkins MP. He mentioned the Forbes list. His voice was the voice of someone who had been sitting with information for 14 days and had finally decided to say something about it. I didn't know, he said. I know, Dad. I should have asked. Yes, I said. You should have. There was a long pause. Can I ask now? I looked at the window. October light on the Boston skyline. 47 miles north, in a foundation-funded clinic in Lawrence, Massachusetts, a pediatric nurse practitioner was seeing her 12th patient of the day. In Rutland, Vermont, a mobile health unit we had helped purchase was completing its second week of operation. In Washington, a bill with our research in the committee record was moving through markup. Yes, I said. You can ask now. He asked. For 45 minutes he asked. I answered everything. We did not repair everything that afternoon. That is not how repair works. What we did was begin. The beginning was real, which made it worth something. I did not confuse it for the whole thing. That evening I stayed late to review the Q4 grant cycle applications. There were 112 of them, representing pediatric health programs in 9 states, totaling $31.7 million in requested funding. We could fund approximately 40% of them. The work of deciding which 40% was the hardest and most necessary work I did. I made a pot of tea. I opened the first application. Outside, the Boston skyline held its shape in the dark. Somewhere in Charlotte, my sister was having dinner with a senator who knew my direct line and my Senate testimony and what the Children's Health Equity Act would mean for 14,000 families. Somewhere in Concord, my father was, I thought, still thinking. I turned the page. The work had always been the point. It still was. That hadn't changed, and nothing. Not a fundraiser, not a text message, not a family's long and careless inattention, was ever going to change it.